Hi there. Welcome back to Buckeye Bigfoot. Tonight we've got another tale straight out of the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Tonight's writer tells us about the night that she saw something that's never left her memory, and it is not afraid of dogs. So grab your snackage, get all saddled up. We've got a long journey tonight into the heart of Sasquatch Valley. The horses are out there waiting, and the Sasquatches, they're waiting for us too. You know, we probably shouldn't keep them waiting. So go on, let's move out. I grew up in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, tucked into one of those narrow hollers where the sun lingers a little late in the morning and disappears a little early in the evening. It's the kind of place where the mist can hang heavy in the trees long after breakfast, and whippoorwills, they'll start calling before you've even thought about supper. Well, that gives you a flavor of where I grew up. So let's get to the rest of this. If you've lived in the mountains long enough, you come to know which sounds belong and which do not. You know the yip of a fox, the scream of a bobcat, and the lonely call of a barred owl. They all have their place, and though they may send a shiver down your spine the first few times you hear them, they will soon settle into the rhythm of the hills, and you learn to live with them. But there was one sound when I was growing up that the folks around there said didn't belong to anything they knew. They just called it the screamer. When I was a little girl growing up, the adults never talked openly about it in front of us children, but, we would hear things when they thought we weren't listening. They said that every few years, always around the turning of the season to fall, somebody up near Low Gap Ridge would be the first to hear it. It was a sound so long and low, it would raise the hair on your arms, and nobody could really quite describe it. They struggled with words, but they said it was too heavy to be a coyote, too drawn out to be a cat, too unnatural and too loud to be a man. I remember neighbors telling hushed stories at hog killings or when folks gathered for picnics and reunions. Old Mr. Rigsby swore he'd heard it one October night when walking home from a revival meeting. Said he dropped his lantern when it came rolling off the ridge, and he ran the whole last mile like a boy half his age. A cousin of mine claimed that she saw eyeshine along the tree line one summer when she and her beau went sparking out by the creek. She said the scream came after, and that boy said he would never walk her home again, and he didn't. Folks laughed at her. They said it was a bunch of courting jitters. But when she told it, I saw the fear in her eyes. Me, I never paid those stories much mind. As kids, we're quick to scoff and even quicker to pretend that we're braver than we are, or at least I was, before. I thought everything was all superstition, just another one of those mountain tales that were designed to keep us kids close to home after dark, keeping us obedient, kind of like our own boogeyman of the mountains. Well, that was before the autumn evening, when I heard and eventually saw it for myself. I must have been 12. The air that year had that hollow feeling it gets when the first real cold snap is on its way. The leaves had turned brittle and bright. I remember they painted the ridge in beautiful fiery colors that year, and it seemed that the smoke of someone burning some kind of brush faintly drifted around on the air for weeks. My daddy had sent me out to feed the chickens before it got too dark. I remember I carried the dented tin bucket down to the coop, scattering the feed all around while the hens pecked and clucked. The sun was sinking fast, as it does on autumn days. That's when it came. A howl rose up from Low Gap Ridge. At first I thought it was wind in the pines, but then it grew stronger, deeper. It started off low, then climbed higher, like a fiddle string that was wound too tight. Then it broke off all at once. The chickens were going wild, wings slapping against the wire, some of them trying to throw themselves against the boards of the coop. The dogs were barking in the yard, not their usual angry bark, but a sharp and unsure kind of bark, their tails pinned down under their bellies. I emptied the feed bucket quickly, and I got myself in the house lickety-split. I thought my parents maybe hadn't heard the howl, but I recall that just as I was going into the door at the back porch, my father had opened it. I think he did hear it, and he was coming out to get me, but he never said that. We just shut everything up tight that night, and that was it. It might have been a week or two later, and I was in the small barn finishing up some chores before school, when suddenly an ear-splitting sound came from just the other side of the barn wall from where I was. Now, this wasn't a howl or a yell exactly. It was something in between. It was a very loud vocal of a kind that I cannot find a word for. It scared me so bad, I jumped back and dropped the fork that I was haying with. I backed up right to the middle of the barn run between pens. The cows, I had already moved them to the opposite pen because I was cleaning, and several of those started kicking up a loud fuss. There was something on the other side of that barn wall, and I knew that. What I didn't know is what it was. 12-year-old me didn't think she wanted to know, but I did know it was bad news. It was at the far corner of the barn opposite from me. I picked the fork back up, and I held it up defensively. What I thought I could do with that, I don't know, but I must have thought that I could do something. I remember loudly yelling for help, but I know darn well they probably couldn't have heard me at the house, especially not over the cows, but I yelled anyway. But I don't think it was me they heard. They heard that howl too, and probably the cows, and as I later figured out, they must have heard the dogs. I was ready to make a run for it to the house, but I was afraid of what was out there. Would it grab me if I left the barn? Next I knew, the barn door opened. There was my dad, shotgun in one hand, flashlight in the other. When he yelled my name, I almost rammed him with the fork, and I just might have done that if he was closer to me. I was really that scared. I was jabbing at air. The dogs were with him, pressed tight against his legs, moving with him, barking, but not leaving his side. He told me to go on up to the house, that he'd stay and watch and make sure I was okay. I knew he wanted me out of the kill zone, as he would have called it. I ran straight for the back kitchen porch. My mother was already there, waiting with her pistol in hand. I stood with her on the porch, watching, my chest heaving, my sides shaking. I had begun to cry, and I didn't even know why. Nothing had really happened. I stood there with my mother watching, and I saw the flashlight sweep wide as my father walked the whole side of the barn. The dogs went with him, of course, but they pressed in mightily close to his legs. The further they went down the side of the barn, the more the dogs growled, barked, and snarled. He went so far down the side. Then he stopped suddenly. And then the dogs, they got louder, and they sort of backed up behind my father. But now there was a hint of a fearful whine to their barking sound. The flashlight beam fixed on something beyond him, something farther down the side of the barn, but it was something we could not see. I saw the arm that held the shotgun raise up. I was expecting to hear a blast, but he did not shoot. Instead, he began backing away, step by deliberate step, only glancing behind him to make sure he wasn't going to trip over the dogs. And those dogs stayed right with him. Only when he was close to the house did he turn and jog the last 20 or 30 feet up to the porch. He hit the steps and he said, "Go, go, go, go," over and over real fast to me and my mother, making a shooing motion with his hand for us to get inside the house. Once inside, he turned and locked the door, Not that that was saying much. We didn't have a deadbolt back then, just the handle lock, and we rarely ever locked it. Nobody walked up the sides of those mountains. After he locked the door, he dropped into a chair at the table, white as milk. The dogs crowded under the table at his feet and would not move. I saw their eyes. Those dogs' eyes were wide and shaky looking. I didn't know what to think. My mama, pretty pale herself by that point, quietly asked him what he'd seen. He didn't look up from the table right away. His knuckles were bloodless and white around the stock of the shotgun that he held so tight. And he said to her, "Lily, I don't know, but it walks on 2 legs, covered in fur, and it ain't none bit scared of these dogs." I tried to sleep that night, but the sound of that scream kept circling back through my mind. Around midnight, I woke up with a start. I heard the dogs growling low in the kitchen. They were kept in that night, pinned up by the back door just inside. My room was at the back of the house, right next to the kitchen, so I heard them clear. I slid out of my bed and crept over to the window. It, too, faced the barn. There was a lot of moonlight that night, and the outside lights had been left on, which we didn't normally do. But because of that extra light, mixed with moonlight, I have no doubt of what I saw. It was a Bigfoot. A pretty big Bigfoot. Or maybe it seemed so big because it was very close. It was as close as the back porch. I know it heard the dogs because that's the direction it was looking. I'm going to take a guess and tell you it might have been 10 or 15 feet from the porch. It was close enough I could see a lot of things about it. It stood nearly as tall as the porch roof, and that was about 8.5 feet off the ground. Where it stood, the barn was back in the distance behind it, and that barn was an old gray that was almost white, so I could actually make it out against the backdrop of the light barn. It had very wide shoulders and a very wide chest. I could see the definition of its arms, but I couldn't tell you where they stopped. It was so far down, though, it was all dark with no light. I am certain, however, that it was covered in some type of hair all over. I know it sounds odd to say that I could see the texture in the dark, but somehow I know that I did. I saw the outline of the head, but I can't tell you anything about the face, which that bothers me to this day. I still have dreams about it, you see, and when I do, I see a face. But I know that it's just one that my mind has made up, because I did not and could not see it that night. The problem is, the face in my dreams is full of fangs and has a snarling mouth, and I do not like that face. And from all the things that I've read and seen online, that probably isn't how that face really was, but I just can't shake it out of my dreams. At that moment that I saw it, I was paralyzed. I so badly wanted to go and wake my parents, but I could not make myself move. I wanted it to go away, but no, it stayed right there, probably a good solid minute or 2. I had the feeling that it had been checking around the house, and when it heard the dogs, it stopped. Now, it seems to me that it was thinking or waiting or trying to decide what to do. I'll say more on that in a minute. But with every passing second, the dogs got louder and louder. Now they were full on growling, barking, and snarling. I saw a light down the hall turn on. Then I heard my father's footsteps storming through to the kitchen. And I know that Bigfoot heard his footsteps too. It suddenly moved to face the kitchen door straight on, like it was ready to charge or fight. I then saw the kitchen light flip on. I could see it outside on the ground where it shined through the windows. I could see more of the Bigfoot now, but only briefly, just for a part of a second. Mostly, I saw eye shine for that minimum second, and that was when it moved. It saw more light, and whatever decision it had been trying to make, it suddenly made. I saw it pivot and walk with heavy, slow steps towards the barn area. It was way out there in the darkness, probably already to the tree line, when I heard the back door open and my father step out. I saw his flashlight sweep the ground outside. After a few seconds, he came in and shut the door. I got up and walked to the kitchen door. My mother was also there. I told them both what I had just seen. I didn't use the word Bigfoot because I didn't know the word back then. This was in 1965 or maybe 1966. I suppose I should have told you that before. But I described it to them, and I must have said things that rang true, because my father did not doubt me. While I'm telling him that, we hear the chickens start up briefly. But before he could get up and get his boots, they settled down, and no chickens were found to be missing. And the dogs, they didn't settle down that night until it must have been far from the house, and even then, they took shelter under the kitchen table. A few days after all of this, I heard my dad talking with a neighbor who was visiting. I guess he'd been having some problems too. I stayed quiet and I listened, just on the other side of the room. The neighbor said that it liked to eat dogs too, and that it had taken 3 of his so far that month. Then my dad said he should probably keep his dogs inside, and then he thought maybe that was why it had come close to our house that night, maybe to see if the dogs were outside, which sometimes admittedly they were in nice weather, but not as a rule. I shivered when I heard him say that. Then they talked about chickens going missing and many other things they said were the work of that thing, the screamer, they called it. They didn't have a real word for it either, I guess. So that was it. It heard the dogs and was trying to decide if it could get to them. I had my answer. Now, there are many other threads with what happened that autumn that I know are somehow connected, but they don't make a lick of sense. Like piles of rocks we would find around the barn. Laundry that suddenly went missing off the line that never was found. And that was a regular thing that happened that autumn. Now, before that and after that, we could always find the laundry if it blew off the line. Never once in all the years we lived there did anything ever go missing, except for that autumn. Of course, we would hear howls and screams at night, and the dogs got to where they didn't want to go far, and they stayed together, which was unusual up to that point. And we still had the odd chicken go missing from our coop from time to time, yet no damage to the coop, as if it knew how to work the lock. After that, things became mostly normal by winter. I never saw it again, but people around there still talked for the next year. I heard a lot of things that as a young girl I wasn't supposed to. Things like how a neighbor down the ridge lost 2 hogs on one night and found nothing but a bloody mess. Then there was Tommy Markham, who lived down the way. We knew him real well. Nice guy, good hunter. But he came back one time so pale and shaky. He said that he was dressing a deer when something close by started making those awful screams, and they started working their way closer to him. He kept on dressing his deer as fast as he could, wanting to get out of there. But then he started to get hit with rocks. When he stood up, thinking it was somebody being silly and pranking him, he looked up and he said he described something exactly like what I saw that night. He left that deer. He abandoned it right there. And I really don't know if Tommy ever went out there hunting again. There were a lot more things, but I don't know what all is and is not connected. But I never saw it again. I am not aware of it if it ever came back to our place for certain, other than missing chickens. You see, after that I did not go out to the coop or to the barn alone past dusk. That was one of the new rules. Any time the dogs picked up their heads or started growling when it was dark outside, we all paid attention. My dad also bought another shotgun and kept it and extra shells out in the barn. Don't worry, you couldn't have walked in and seen it. But he just didn't want to be cornered out there, and he didn't want to carry the shotgun every single place he went. Now, after a few months over the winter, this all started to fade away, in my head at least. By spring, I think I had forgotten all about it. I was hitting my teen years, and, well, we know what happens then with girls. Even with all the new rules around, they were just new rules by then, or should I say old rules. So I really wasn't thinking about the screamer a lot. As I got older, I heard a lot of other talk. Some would say what they saw was a wild, shaggy man who had been living up there in the mountains so long he forgot how to talk, and he had grown hair everywhere from living out in the cold. A few others thought that it was a demon, and still others said it was something else entirely, but I don't know what they thought it was. All I know is what I saw, plain as day, in the moonlight. Now, it's been, 60 years since that autumn evening, and I still hear the scream in my dreams. Sometimes I wake before it finishes, and the silence in the house feels heavy, as if that thing is waiting just beyond the back door. And as I mentioned earlier, I still see the face, the imagined face that fills in the blank from that night. I left that area of Tennessee when I left for college. I never moved back there, though I went back many times every year to see family. But no, I never lived in Tennessee again. Most of the family that I knew there is long gone, and I really haven't been there overnight again since 1998. My advice to you, though, is if you ever find yourself up in those Smoky Mountains and the sun drops behind those hills, you should probably leave. Go on, get out, get indoors, and stay there till the sun comes up. Because I promise you, there is something in those mountains that walks on two legs, and it isn't afraid of dogs. All right, well, that's the kind of story that sure makes you wonder what else might be living in those mountains, doesn't it? Well, no, not really. I guess we aren't the kind to wonder, are we? We know what's out there. All right, listen, my Sasquatch, I think that's going to do it for tonight. I will be seeing you again for another journey down into Sasquatch Valley. Until then, just remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.